Disclaimer, disclaimer, read all about it.
Gone somewhere and dyed my hair now. Wanna be alone. It's much to bear and you don't care, and I won't play alone. I got you in my sight. I keep all of what you said to me. I get you on your knees. Rewrite all the things you said that I should be. I'll get you, now you beg me please. Hey.
Hello, everybody. Hey, Heather, good to see you. Mr. Eve Carey, woot woot. She just woke up and is eating dinner, but she's going to fall back asleep after listening to me, like they all do. Hey, Tammy, good to see you. Gma, OG Brooke, been with me for over 2 years, going strong. Sleuthy Goosey, good to see you in the chat. I need to shout out Sleuthy because a lot of the data that I've reviewed with you guys came from her amazing spreadsheet capabilities. I can barely keep my phone charged past 2% on a good day. So shout out to her. We've kind of been through the same ride together, if you will, on the Twitter, or X as they call it now. Hey, Nico, good to see you. Yeah, it was very helpful, very helpful. So thank you for that. I think we've been on panel maybe a handful of times in passing. So it's good to see you in chat. I'm glad you're here. All right. There's a lot to go over in a very short amount of time, but I want to show you some of the things real quick to get it out of the way of what I think about the last day 30 and then day 29. And when I talk about Lucky, I want your opinion. So I believe, in my true, honest opinion, that I have captured Lucky on camera. I have showed some of the people in the shadows, if you will, of Discord what I found. I think Lucky is passing by Officer Mullaney, which was the second officer on scene in the Karen Reed case, at 6:10 going into 6:11, I believe. I want to know what you think and if I'm right or wrong. Now, we'll go over Lucky Laugren. I always say it wrong. Lucky's testimony. I do believe he was explaining it poorly, but he wasn't wrong either. Timelines are not always going to be 100% unless you have that data, which, okay, look, you should have that GPS data on the plows, right? The snow plow. But I don't know what happened there. It either exists or it doesn't. Who the fuck knows, right? Yeah. Mr. Eve, we spit cheesy pickup lines to each other all the time. This is so true. And I wouldn't want it any other way. So, okay, Lucky. I think it's him. Now, there was a by the yard snowplow company that would compensate for when it was really snowy and the roads needed to be snow plowed. They would come and pick up kind of the slack. However, I don't know if they were in Lucky's territory, if you will. I'm not sure. But I want you to listen, really listen to this video. I did put it on X, which is what I post anything Karen Reed related on, because that's where it's really, grasped everybody's balls, if you will, and YouTube. But give me just a second to pull that up. While I'm doing that, who else is in the chat? Go ahead and hit that like button. All 14 of you. I got to get back in the algorithm. Your girl is lacking. life. But I will get back there. Those 3 strikes really did a number, Ooh, that was not my fault either. But I think you get kind of shadow banned from my understanding. So that's what happened to me. So rude. By the way, we see you, Juliana. We see you. Hey, Rocco, good to see you. We see you. So Sleuthy thinks that I found Lucky on cam. I don't know why they didn't bring it up, though. I think it doesn't matter. I think it's moot at this point. Maybe it's because he wasn't 100% dead on balls accurate, which is a My Cousin Vinny term. Don't you forget it. Also, this is what I think of with pirouette when they say John O'Keefe did a pirouette and landed 30 feet. I don't agree. I don't know if you agree or not, but I definitely do not agree with that. All right, so here's the video. Can y'all hear that? Put a 1 in the chat if you can. Put a 2 if you did not hear that. I don't think I even heard that. Let's try it now. No, okay. Let's start over. Okay, again, this is Officer Mullaney. He is the second officer that arrived at 34 Fairview. All right. Around 6:10 going into 6:11. I believe he passed Lucky Laugren, the snowplow driver with the Franken's truck snowplow that was old and raggedy or whatever. But he passes, if this is Lucky, he passes Lucky. Lucky testifies, y'all, that he passed first responders. So it makes sense to me. All right, let's go.
Can you describe for the jury sort of the route that you took going from the station to Fairview Road that morning?
I took a right onto Washington Street from the station, and then I took a right onto Dedham Street from Washington Street, a left onto Cedar Crest from Dedham, and then a left onto Fairview Road from Cedar Crest.
All right, there's, in my opinion, Franken truck. Let's look at that again. You'll see Officer Mullaney kind of coming through. There's Cedar Crest turning onto Fairview. Right?
Street, a left onto Cedar Crest from Dedham, and then a left onto Fairview Road from Cedar Crest.
You recall seeing Officer Sarif during your en route time sort of between the station and arriving on the scene?
I do not know.
If you recall, what was sort of the
Welcome in,
vehicular
Taryn.
traffic on the roadway between the station and your arrival on Fairview Road?
I don't recall there being any traffic.
You would tell.
Say what now? Mr. Mullaney, was that not you passing by a vehicular on the road? Have I hallucinated? Because I'm pretty sure you did. Now, does this guy, that officer, does he have dash cam? Nope. Which would have shown the alternate angle of the entire scene. Why? Where was his footage? Was it because he was part-time? He didn't need a dash cam? I don't know. Canton tends to do whatever the hell they want. But I would really like to know where that footage went or if it existed. I kind of feel like it did. But unfortunately, it would have shown Lucky. And me has a feeling that Lucky was going to be a fall guy, a potential fall guy. Hence the whole 1 to 2 something a.m. debacle with Jen McCabe, Matt McCabe, deleted messages from Brian, Albert and Higgins. I think it was all kind of sort of trying to get to a plan. But Lucky stood his ground, even though he is a diehard for his right. He's a ride or die for his friends. He's a good person. He didn't do a few things that he normally would have because of the Alberts, like hitting the basketball hoop. Oops. Right. And Lally was losing his mind. But we'll get to that. So he says he don't know nothing about no vehiculars on the road. All right.
You had testified that you approached Fairview from the Cedar Crest side, correct?
Yes.
And when you take a left on Cedar Crest to enter Fairview Road, 34 Fairview is the second house on the right. Does that make sense?
From Cedar Crest? Yes.
Yes.
If you recall, what was sort of the vehicular traffic on the roadway between the station and your arrival on Fairview Road?
I don't recall there being any traffic.
I know it's repetitive, but sir.
Now, you initially went from which side of Fairview?
Right side.
What would that be, the right side? I'm sorry. Would it be the Cedar Crest side or the...
It would have been Cedar Crest side.
Coming from Cedar Crest, and then you went up Fairview, came back down?
Came back down. As I'm going up, I am actually seeing first responders. And at that point, as I'm coming back down, the road's blocked at that point.
There you go. Now, it wasn't technically blocked, but I would assume that he thought it was, but it was blocked a little later. I mean, you're seeing all of these flashing lights. You would assume that's a no-go for me. As a snowplow driver, I can't go down there. There's first responders. I got to go. And he keeps going down Cedar Crest, which basically he kind of says that, but it kind of gets a little muddled because Lally is muddled and frustrated and flustered, and he can't get his 2 cents together. But I trust, and it's very obvious to me that his testimony lines up with that video. Now, a lot of people agree. I mean, a lot of people. All right. I think it was like 130,000 people agree at this point, which is important because
For the jury.
testimony is everything whenever you don't see it. No one has seen John O'Keefe on the snow before Carrie Roberts and Jim McCabe and Karen Reed find him dead on the front lawn. So, why did Lally ask Officer Mullaney about the vehiculars on the roadway? It was because he wanted to make sure that Lucky was not, in my opinion, Lucky was not mentioned as being on the road to corroborate that. And Officer Mullaney's footage, dash cam footage, would have done that. So it goes, in my opinion, it makes me feel like Lucky was definitely a target. Because the snowplow came very early, if anybody else can remember. It was like from the jump onward, especially when Turtle Boy came on scene, right? Right. Vehicular particulars. That's going to be my new favorite saying for the rest of my life. Lally was just an idiot asking Lucky about the body when every single one of the witnesses said they didn't see him. And there were a lot more of them and a lot less now. Agree. Thank you, Taryn. I think so too. And again, the point of that is to figure out why do they want to hide Lucky, right? And again, it's because, in my opinion, they tried to frame him at one time. Now, we didn't get to hear, or I don't remember or recall, them bringing up the missing or deleted 6 phone calls and the times between Jen McCabe and Brian Albert. Big Dog, owner of 34 Fairview. I was very disappointed in that. However, we now know it's legit, right? I really wanted to know about that. How did Rick find those specifics? And I was kind of disappointed, like I said. Maybe things will come to light in another way. Now, going back to the beginning real quickly, and then we're going to jump into the latest. This is very interesting.
is that the defendant, Karen Reed,
This is Lally at the opening statement. A lot of people were probably like crossing their eyes, wanting to, listen to the defense so they don't really remember all of the details of what he said. I surely didn't. Didn't ring any bells for me until later on. So I decided to watch it again. Let's recall the original opening statement of Lally and what his theory is, what the Commonwealth's theory is based on.
is that the defendant, Karen Reed, is guilty of murder in the second degree, striking the victim, Mr. O'Keefe, with a car, knocking him back onto the ground, striking his head on the ground, causing the bleeding in his brain, swelling. Is that the defendant, Karen Reed, is guilty of murder in the second degree, striking the victim, Mr. O'Keefe, with a car, knocking him back onto the ground, striking his head on the ground, causing the bleeding in his brain, swelling.
So we're going to listen to, obviously, the experts about his, the medical examiners on both sides, which, boy, oh boy. Dr. What is it? Sortabello? Sortabello? Irene? Miss Irene. She pretty much helps the defense out because she says, in a roundabout way, it's not typical. His injuries are not typical of a pedestrian strike, right? And it could be from a fight. I mean, plain as day, she basically shut down Lally's case. And that was just the beginning. It started to really unravel, and so did he, right? Very quickly, where he bullied a poor old lady. He was just trying to say, these look like dog bites to me because I've been a nurse and a cop, and there are more things that Dr. Russell has been than hasn't been. It would be quicker just to say, what have you not done, ma'am? I'm telling you, she's done it all. And it's amazing to me because there are people out there that dedicate their whole lives to learn all of the things. And I get that because if I could, I would do all of the things. I'd be a lawyer, a doctor, all of those things. So what we're going to do real quick is go to, excuse me. We're going to go to the latest and greatest closing arguments hearing from today. I think it's very interesting what Miss McLaughlin, as Melanie Little says, it's very interesting what she says about Bev saying, we don't need to put this in and that in. But McLaughlin saying what she said as evidence and what she's going to use in her closing argument, which is text messages and a video showing the voicemails to remind everybody, hey, Magpie, good to see you, love. The voicemails of where Karen is saying, John, I hate you, you pervert. Oh, that, in my opinion, is very weak for you to have to go to that level in your closing argument. Now, if she were to say something like, John, I hate you, I'm going to fucking kill you. Okay, sure. I could see that maybe. But she doesn't. So, and of course, Turtle Boy was confronted and assaulted in downtown Canton outside of D&E Pizza. He was originally at CF McCarthy's to do some testing and some things, which he did say the day before that he would do. I think even 2 days before that, he said that. But anyway, Jill Daniels knocks the phone out of his hand after getting out of a car. And it just goes to hell in a handbasket from there. So, all right. Karen Reed trial, day 30. I like watching the WCVB just for, even though they're very anti-Karen Reed, in my opinion, the coverage that they do. But we'll just use Law and Crime. They're legit. Oh, can't forget about Crash Daddy. Crash Daddy. Where you at, Crash Daddy? Well, that's Andrew. He's Cash Daddy because he makes all the big bucks. He's the president of whatever region it is for ARCA. So he's Cash Daddy, and I'm going to call this man Crash Daddy because the chats have established how handsome this man is. Those last two destroyed the whole case. No kidding. No kidding. So I don't know if anybody remembers who covered the last part of the day. Oh, charging conference. There we go, Court TV. All right. I'm going to skip the first two. Beep boop. You are unmuted.
Just that.
Remember that time Bev said, I totally blew off the exhibits. I'm sure that
What
was
the
not
Commonwealth's
on purpose.
intention is not to request an instruction on voluntary manslaughter. Reasonable inferences that you have drawn, taken together, prove that she.
So if anybody doesn't know, this is just, the charging conference for the closing arguments, what you can and cannot say, what, the jury is going to be instructed on. This bill, we've been in court trials together on this platform enough to know that this is just to get everything kind of squared away, what you can and can't do and what the jury's going to hear. I think they get an hour, which is really not that long because the opening statements flew by for me. That's just my opinion.
And the defense has the language of accident. Reasonable person going to do that. So in the language from the Commonwealth, Commonwealth's instruction, Ms. Giannetti, I've added, I think, one line that a person acts negligent, reasonable person would not. You. So
Sorry, I lost my timestamp. So they're about to get into, Bev wants to get it on the record or tell Yannetti to get it on the record for something very specific about the Commonwealth wanting the reasoning for this wording with the jury instruction.
leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. So what the Commonwealth has provided is basically just the six elements with nothing further. They're pretty much. So, Ms. McLaughlin, why don't we start from here? Why did you just give me the 6 elements?
Your Honor, as you suggested, the first 2 have been defined extensively for the jury, and I believe the other 4 prongs are self-evident and they don't need further instruction.
Yeah.
I think it would be sort of redundant or unnecessary to explain to a juror.
From the Commonwealth that I did not include.
Do you intend to give a consciousness of guilt instruction?
Oh, I'll hear you on.
Okay, consciousness of guilt. So this is this lady has maybe spoken a few sentences and now she has the balls and audacity to say what she is about to say about Karen deleting ring footage. The Commonwealth really is, something else, because it was proven, these things were proven to be not the case with the ring footage being deleted with Karen, right? And all of those other details. It really irks me to hear this woman sit up and say this stuff.
On that. I don't, but you can try and convince me if you want.
Right, Suvi?
Your Honor, the Commonwealth would put forth that there's been sufficient evidence that the defendant has engaged in actions that go to a consciousness of guilt. There's an inference that the defendant deleted portions of the ring video, a narrow area of ring videos that are missing. They begin with Mike Camerano picking up his daughter at 11 a.m. They resume at 5:07 when the defendant backs her vehicle into John O'Keefe's. Then there's a period missing where the defendant shows the broken taillight to Jennifer McCabe and Carrie Roberts, and then the video.
Yeah, okay, let's stop and talk about that. the video that was talked about where they showed the taillight to Jen McCabe, it didn't happen. And when they exit the vehicle, when they arrive, no one stopped at the taillight, guys. Not anyone. They went straight into the house. That was Jen McCabe's testimony. That when they got out of the car, she said, look, I think I hit my taillight. So, fuck you, Miss McLaughlin. You're wrong. It was literally proven that she was lying. So how can you sit there and say that? If it was true or if there was some inkling, I could understand that. There was none. We know she had no access to that. One of the kids testified. John's niece and nephew. Now, the original, information that was given to, written down or taken by one of the troopers was that I think the nephew said she had access to the computer upstairs. He doesn't know that really, though. We now know that's not true. With the ring footage, it was on his phone. So, not to mention who had Karen Reed's phone and at what time. From day one, Trooper Proctor had her phone after what? What was it, 11? Suthi says if she does do the closing, it's because she doesn't give a damn. She will literally say anything. I agree. And I think that she's actually the mastermind to a lot of this stuff. I really do. I think Lally was the one to speak on it, and she was the one to think on it because Lally cannot think. Obviously. He needs somebody to guide him with his, Bev, for instance. But I really think she's behind a lot of this. And I have an inkling, I shouldn't say this, but there could be some conflict of interest that I found, but I'm not, you know what? That's not my circus and not my monkey. That's what I'm going to just step out on that one. Maybe we can sleep it together later on Twitter. It was John's phone, wasn't even on Karen's phone. Exactly. So even if she did have access, Proctor had her phone anyway, is what I'm trying to get at. He had John's phone from the jump, from 10 something or 11, which we're still trying to figure out how the hell it got to the Canton PD to give to Proctor. I've showed on this platform and on X that Carrie, after John is put in the stretcher and gone, she airs out a blanket like it's no big deal and puts it in the back of her car, a SUV. And I was really perplexed at why they didn't, why the defense didn't jump on that. Maybe there's something going on with Carrie because they didn't cross her. There's something going on there. Maybe.
Video resumes again when the victim's niece gets picked up. But not only the missing ring videos, but also the defendant's behavior. What began as testified to from the Dighton police officer, the defendant's father called the Dighton Police Department and requested a ride to the Good Samaritan Hospital due to the weather conditions. He then drove himself to Brockton to pick up the defendant and perhaps bring her home. What they do in the middle of a blizzard is now Dighton to Brockton is half a distance. Then they travel further all the way back to Canton to retrieve the murder weapon. Along with the defendant's brother, they all meet at the victim's residence to remove the murder vehicle and bring it all the way down to Dighton, Massachusetts. That would go to concealing evidence and intentional. There's also evidence of the defendant's statements going to her consciousness of guilt. Within hours after John's death, the victim's sister-in-law calls the defendant, reaches out, wants to make sure she's okay. The defendant says to her, I only have to remember the bad times. You'll likely never hear from me again. Erin O'Keefe testified that she tells the defendant, of course we are, we're friends. She's never heard from the defendant since. So I think...
Ma'am, it was part of her bail condition. Lally was there when he heard the bail conditions. She could not be around the family at all. At all. She went to go get her items from upstairs. That's, as you heard, the reason they think that she deleted the ring footage upstairs. That's, girl, bye. Sit down, sit all the way down. You already been sitting this whole time, haven't done nothing, said nothing, in my opinion. Wow. Looking like Brian Hagan's cousin or something, ma'am. The audacity.
That goes to the defendant's state of mind in the hours after the death. But in addition to the ring video, I think there's strong evidence of consciousness of guilt to move the murder vehicle within hours of John's death.
Ms. Giannetti?
Well, first of all, with regard to the ring video, Trooper Guarino, who was certainly no friend of the defense in this case, testified that there was zero evidence that Karen Reed had access or had access anything on that computer, and the Commonwealth utterly failed to prove that she had any access to delete anything. So I would say that that is a red herring.
The glassy eye cuts and shade from this man. I've about had it. I'm so glad this is, it's bittersweet, but I'm glad this is it. We're at the end. We're at the final countdown, because I have had it with this man. And I am glad that he's covering his downstairs mix up, if you will, because I was really getting tired of that camera zooming in up on those hairy boys. Sorry, I said what I said. I was getting real sick of it. I'm trying to listen and look at what Karen's doing, saying, and feeling, looking at her face, and all I can see is John's brother.
This is the one case, I think, a very rare case where there's much more consciousness of guilt evidence with regard to the Commonwealth's own witnesses than there is with regard to the defendant in a criminal case. With regard to the other arguments, I'm having trouble following.
So the moving the car extra distance during a blizzard, that part of the argument that the Commonwealth made.
Right. I mean, the evidence was that my client maintained a residence in Mansfield. She didn't live at One Meadow. She spent time there. To say that moving her car to her own home, where the police later found it because she was there and picked up the phone and said that the police were coming, and she stayed there.
Yeah, she didn't run. She didn't O.J. Simpson it over to the border somewhere or hightail it out of there. She just lost her boyfriend. They tried to section her and keep her. They did section 12 her. For a reason, in my opinion. I think it was very premeditated. We know why. And she's trying to figure out all this stuff, and Proctor Trooper, as Jim McCabe says, wants to basically nail her immediately. We're coming to get all the things. Proctor watched her put in the code in her phone with Bukkake and got in it before they had a search warrant. No. Not to mention, my mama's would be the first place that I would probably go if something as traumatic as that happened. And you're going to say some shit when you have just realized your boyfriend, who you've been fighting with, is dead on the lawn. And you said those things. I mean, I couldn't imagine. I really couldn't imagine how much pain she felt because of that alone. Not that she's guilty, but because she's regretful of what she said before he died. That's going to be forever. Can't change that. She will live with that forever. All right? That's enough pain. But now cops are coming to get the vehicle. They're looking at the taillight. You can see Karen Reed and her dad, and I think her mother too, looking at the taillight to see what happened. And everybody thought, oh, look how guilty, Crusty Panties and all of them dumbasses. And Grant, oh God, she's so guilty. Look, if they're looking, they know. Well, Karen's Karen Reed's dad said this and that. No, it was because there was a reaction to something that happened. It's called cause and effect. Everything that they did was because of something that already initiated, more than likely from third-party culprits and their flying minions, or their flying monkeys. That's a fact, Jack. It's just the way it is. Like, this is no longer a debate for, is Karen Reed innocent or guilty of a crime? It's about how badly, how deep does this corruption go? I was watching El Jefe, Sean. I have been watching him, but I watched a little bit more than usual just recently, and he has been saying this over and over. Do you think that they give a shit about Colin Albert being in the house? I agree with him. No, there's something bigger brewing, and has been brewing, and I think Sandra Birchmore has something to do with it. I really do. But maybe even beyond that, it's more than that. This hasn't just been happening because of Brian Albert. This is in my opinion, a collective effort for a while.
We're able to seize the car. That does not rise to the level of consciousness of guilt.
Okay.
Kind of the defendant actually moved her vehicle to her parents' residence.
It really is.
Indictment, not her residence in Mansfield, which would further support an inference that she was concealing evidence.
Right. Well, even if it's her parents' house, Your Honor, again, if she's no longer dating John O'Keefe because he's passed away, then it makes sense for her to have her vehicle at her parents' house or her own house. And again, it does not rise to the level of consciousness of guilt.
Nor does she stay at the home of her boyfriend to grieve with the family who just lost John. She quickly comes back to the house, brings her family members, goes upstairs for about 20 minutes by herself with her father, and quickly leaves the residence.
What do you expect? It's not her house. Like, what did they expect? It wouldn't have mattered what Karen Reed did. It would not have mattered. She could have did a prayer vigil or circle right there in the middle of town. She would look guilty. It doesn't matter. And I think everybody knows that. I think the jury does too. Could be wrong. Maybe. Very slight chance, maybe. But I don't think in my heart of hearts that this is even plausible in the minds of a jury. Things like that. And if that's going to be in their closing argument, because it's leaking out, right? We're obviously seeing what's going to be, what they're trying to put in, right? I don't think that's going to fly. I don't think any of that portrays guilt at all.
There's no evidence that she did anything upstairs or that she had access or the ability to change anything.
Okay. It's a little bit more robust argument than I expected from the Commonwealth, so I'm going to think about this. I'll let you know before closing argument tomorrow, and if I don't instruct on it, Commonwealth's still able to testify to it. Witness pretrial preparation, that came out on both sides. I'm going to give the second alternative. Okay, Ms. Giannetti, I'll hear.
I don't know. She might let it in because she pretty much already admitted from the very jump, and I didn't play this, so my bad, but she was like, I let a lot of evidence into this trial that I didn't have to do. And, this is my right to overrule basically what you're wanting. It's within the law for me to do so. And I'm like, I hate that. I hate when judges say that. Just because you can don't mean you should, right? Yeah. But she's gonna, more than likely. I just feel it. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
I hear you on your instructions.
So I believe that we've covered the vast majority of it.
I'll give you the opportunity to argue the Bowden one, just so you can make a record.
Sure. All right, let me just pull up. And I just have a moment here. I'll put that document away. Let's just put it in. It's this one. We start with any signs of struggle. You never checked out the basement. You never looked for a weapon that could have been.
This is important stuff. I definitely suggest going and watching on Court TV or anywhere else that has it, the charging conference. Watch the rest of it. It just gives you kind of an insight of what you're more than likely going to see or hear. During closing argument, again, they have an hour. So it's the final chapter, guys. It's the final chapter. I did not think, honest to God, that it would have closed today. Like, I didn't think today was going to be it, where they rested the defense rest their case. I am pretty shocked on that, but I think it's actually a good thing because those experts that we're about to watch, I think nailed the coffin for the Commonwealth and absolutely helped vindicate Karen Reed. That's just my opinion. You don't have to have the same one. That's just my opinion. Excuse me. So I'm going to go to the very end of this man. I forgot his name right off the top of my head. Poop, it went away. But he's done over like, what was it? How many? Thousands and thousands of autopsies? I think I'm even underestimating that, but he's done a lot. Is it 10,000? 13,000? 13,000. My God, that's a lot of autopsies. If I'm wrong on that, 14,000? Could you imagine seeing 14,000 bodies over time? Oh, Lord have mercy. I don't think that's not for me. I don't think. So let's go to the testimony of right there.
3 or 4, I think, over the years involving children, was primarily children or fractures, but you would at least expect bruising.
Based on your professional experience.
My time stamps are like minutes off. It sucks. So Miss Little finally comes out to play. I was excited because I was like, oh, look, she knows how to, in my opinion, I think that she is really good at avoiding the objection by really going hard. And then whenever they're really giving her a hard time, she'll go, can we see, can I approach? So everybody goes to sidebar and she wins. She gets her way. She is sneaky and she's good at it. She's a sneaky devil. And I really like Miss Little.
What is your opinion regarding whether those injuries are consistent with a pedestrian being struck by a motor vehicle?
Objection.
I'm going to allow it. You can answer that, Doctor. Can you answer that?
I can answer it, yes.
So go right ahead.
Okay.
People's like, okay.
Okay, but the question was, to be precise, can you just rephrase it? I mean, I said yes, I can answer it, but I can't remember exactly how you phrased it.
Yes, based on your extensive training and experience, what is your opinion regarding whether those injuries are consistent with being struck, with an individual being struck by a vehicle?
If you mean struck in that part of the body, on the arm, like
Yes.
directly, I would say no, it doesn't look like that at all.
And can you explain that?
Well, if
No pirouetting. John O'Keefe did not get sideswiped on the arm where he pirouettes like a ballerina or a ice skater around and around and around, or just around once, where he lands 30 feet away onto the ground. That is goofy. That's his goofiest theory. And not to mention, he has no injuries to suggest that at all, which is what he's about to say.
If you're hit by a vehicle, or whichever part of your body is hit, if it's a significant impact at all, you're going to get bruising, and we don't have any bruising here. We just have what I would call linear abrasions without any bruising. So that does not look to me at all remotely like an impact from a motor vehicle.
What would you expect to see if an individual's arm were struck by the rear of a motor vehicle?
Well, as I just said a second ago, primarily a lot of bruising, and that's what we don't see here. You might see, well, depending on the circumstances, you might see other things like a fracture or fractures, but you would at least expect bruising.
In your professional opinion, based on your many years of experience, have you conducted any autopsies involving individuals who were involved in any sort of animal attack?
Animal attacks in general, yes, quite a few actually. Well, when I say quite a few, it's not an enormously common event, but I've done probably at least a dozen or so involving deaths where an animal was involved one way or another.
Yeah. So I think that we can come to the conclusion that he knows what he's talking about. He's done enough autopsies. I had enough experience to know what he's talking about, even if he did not have the exact same situation come to his autopsy table as John O'Keefe. Because John O'Keefe is a special case. Really. He really is. The details were skewed. The evidence was skewed. All right. So I don't think that we really need to go much further into his testimony. However, we'll give Lally a minute.
Unconscious. He would still be capable of breathing for a while until that brain swelling took over and pushed the brainstem down. But he would immediately from the point of impact, he would have been unconscious for sure.
I am actually really thankful, very thankful deep down in my soul that he was knocked unconscious, whatever happened to him, from the back of the head. Okay. That was the initial point of contact in his opinion. Whether he be pushed down maybe there's some stairs onto a doorknob from the basement at 34 Fairview, whether he got punched in the eye like a bat and then landed to the back of the head, which is kind of my theory. I think he got the 1-2 to the eyes because of the cut over the eye, which the back of the head getting the skull fractures that radiated just made it worse. Okay, it just made it worse, which the raccoon eyes came from. But that's just my opinion. The initial cause of the brain swelling where he's going to die from, right, is the back of the head fracture. Multiple skull fractures. Getting hit in the back of the head in that area is deadly, obviously. It is a very sensitive area to nerve-wise. Like, there's more to it. I mean, Bello got into all of that. But I'm glad to hear that he was unconscious because that might suggest he didn't suffer too much. And that's worth something because we all wanted to know if he was just dying in the cold alive with his eyes open. But his brain injury was so bad. It's really good to hear that he was more than likely unconscious, right? It's kind of relieving, but it doesn't make it any easier. But just a little bit of relief, I guess, for myself. Because I hate hearing that people suffer.
He have been able to stand up, move, or walk?
No, he would have been unconscious completely.
Do you have any opinion regarding whether that injury is consistent with having been struck on the ground on dirt or grass?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the question.
I'll rephrase it. That was a poorly worded question. Is that injury consistent with striking dirt or grass?
Like, for example, falling onto grass?
Yes.
No, I don't think so. If there's a fall involved here, and there could be, it would be onto a hard surface. But the grass, and as I understand from all the material I reviewed, there was also some snow, and so that might even cushion the impact even a little bit more. But even without the snow, grass is basically too soft for somebody falling and hitting their head on it to get the injuries I've just described.
Yeah. So that really hurt Lally. I'm sure it did, because the Commonwealth's theory, as I played earlier in this live, is that he struck his head on the ground. So the back of the head is from the ground after Karen Reed hits him. Think about that. Think about that. Oh. Even if you were to get launched 30 feet, which is impossible, and we'll see why here in a minute. Please tell me how soft ground or even frozen ground could do that. Unless you were pushed off of a roof, maybe, I guess, but not in this case. Where's the bruises? Where are the injuries to suggest a pedestrian strike, a vehicular strike? Mm-mm.
In addition to focusing on the injuries that were present, what significance do you place on the absence of injuries when conducting an autopsy?
What significance do I put on what?
In addition to focusing on the injuries that are present, what significance do you place on the absence of injuries when conducting an autopsy?
Well, as you put it there, it's a rather general question, but I mean, when you're doing an autopsy, you obviously want to see what is there and what's not, and everything can be relevant, including absent things. Now, in this particular case, there are a number of features of things that are absent that are important. I've already alluded to one, and that is on the arm. If that was an impact from the vehicle, I would expect bruising. But do you want me to continue?
Yes.
Yeah.
Honestly, sir, no. Because I'm convinced there's reasonable doubt if I were a jury. That's for damn sure. So let's get to Crash Daddy. Crash Daddy. Ladies, stay thirsty out there. Get you some water.
You tell us the evidence given to the court and jury in the case now and hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you.
In the Middle East, where they basically designed energy-absorbing seats because there was injuries when the vehicles were going over IEDs.
Is ARCA known both now?
About the taillight. So when a pedestrian is positioned in a normal upright position, you certainly would expect to see damage to the bumper. In a lot of cases, what happens is, the bumper is just clipped on. So again, the force of that impact will oftentimes cause the bumper to kind of become unmounted or unclipped. You certainly could see deformation to body paneling, such as the lift gate or the quarter panel as well.
Is that especially true at higher speeds, meaning above 15 miles per hour or so?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Was there any apparent damage to the Lexus that appeared consistent with any kind of pedestrian interaction that you saw?
No, it was really confined to just the taillight, a very isolated portion of the vehicle.
Okay. I like that, he kind of goes into this. Here's what you should see, just like the doctor you just heard. The medical examiner, what is it, from San Bernardino County, which is ironic because that's where my dad's side of the family's from. But there are things that are absent in this case, right? That would suggest the Commonwealth's theory is shit. And we all know that. And it's the absence of things like maybe dents in the the bumper, or the bumper having more damage. But because all of this was isolated to a taillight, which should not break, they were meant to withstand wrecks. Interesting, isn't it?
During your review and your investigation, did you note information concerning items that were supposedly found on the bumper?
Yes.
What was that?
I believe it was noted there was 2 apparent glass fragments located on the top bumper cover.
What's the significance of the presence of those items or the lack of materiality of those items in your view?
Well, again, I think it's going back to the scene evidence. Again, we knew that there was glass fragments, what appeared to be from a drinking glass at the scene of the alleged incident.
Is there any glass consistent with the glass that was supposedly found on the bumper, in the taillight housing, the taillight mechanism, anything from the car, from the Lexus, that would account for that glass?
Okay, I think I understand. So the taillight itself is not comprised of any glass. It is all plastic. So that damage, or I should say that glass on the top bumper cover could not have come from the right taillight.
Boom. So this alludes to a cocktail glass, which, if you did not hear, they shot it out of a cannon, which was kind of cool to hear, at different speeds or different methods. I think up to 37 miles per hour. Lally tried to say, well, did you do it in a blizzard where the winds were going up to a certain amount, 25, 30 plus miles per hour winds? Sit down, Lally. Because he said it's irrelevant. The speed at which it's going, the weather ain't gonna do shit to a very heavy cocktail glass. Sit down, sir. You're not the expert. Crash Daddy's the expert, right?
Now, based on your review of the information that was provided to you, did you undertake any testing of that vehicle? I'm sorry, any testing concerning the damage to the vehicle?
Yes, sir.
All right, can you describe what that testing was?
So we performed, again, this is with Dr. Rentschler and I working together on this again. We performed projectile testing to the tail lamp with a drinking glass as well as a hybrid head form.
Let's take those one at a time. How would you describe the drinking glass test?
Certainly. So again, from our review of the evidence, we knew that we had an isolated portion of damage to Lexus confined to the taillight. So we know that we're dealing with potentially a small object that could have created that. Looking at, again, the evidence in terms of the scene photographs, we know that we have a damaged drinking glass at the scene in the vicinity of the fragments of the taillight. So the theory that Dr. Rentschler and I put forward is potentially an individual threw this drinking glass at the back of the Lexus, causing the taillight to fracture.
I'm going to interrupt you right there. You and Dr. Rentschler formed that theory and wanted to test that theory, correct?
Yes.
You were not told that theory by the defense because you've never met us?
Correct.
You were not told that theory by the Commonwealth. You've never met them, correct?
Correct.
Your theory was the product of simply having some facts.
I think he's handsome. I'm not going to lie.
Got a broken drinking glass, a broken taillight. Let's put them together and figure out if the...
But Mr. Eve, you're totally the handsomest. So don't even get it twisted over there. Probably not even listening anymore anyway. You got my heart, boo.
drinking glass could be responsible for the taillight and vice versa.
Absolutely, yes.
And that was your determination of, well, we were given instructions to reconstruct this. Let's look at every single angle, correct?
Absolutely. And I will note, as part of the engagement with the entity that retained us, we were asked not to do any outside research or investigation of the case. It was to be based solely on the evidence that we were provided.
Okay. As a matter of fact, and importantly, while you were doing your testing, had you ever even heard of the Karen Reed case?
No.
So getting back to that testing, and I interrupted your flow, you were looking at whether or not the glass could have produced the damage to the rear taillight that you saw, correct?
Correct.
And what did you do in furtherance of making a determination about whether or not that was possible?
Certainly. So myself and one of our lab technicians at ARCA, we designed and developed a pressurized air cannon. So it was capable of firing a projectile.
A pressurized fire cannon, huh? Air cannon, rather. I want to see that sometime.
Such as a drinking glass at the taillight. So it essentially, you can think of it kind of as a giant cannon, but it had a barrel, and then there was a valve that would open rapidly, and directly behind that was a pressurized vessel. And depending on the pressure, the PSI of that vessel would determine essentially the speed at which that glass would be projected into the taillight.
So you literally...
Before we get into your answer, Crash Shaddy, potato guns are dangerous. I grew up with well, I didn't grow up with them. Boys in the neighborhood would shoot those bastards out, and oh my God. Do you know how fast those things go? And a potato can kill you for sure. No doubt. It's a blunt force. It will give you blunt force trauma. And I've seen it pretty much break somebody's leg, either leg or ankle. I mean, they're no joke.
Built a cannon?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Pretty cool job. Tell me what the results of your testing was with this pneumatic cannon that would fire the drinking glass.
Certainly. So we performed 2 different tests in terms of speeds. The target speeds were 30 and 40 miles per hour.
Why was that?
Well, so with consultation with Dr. Rentschler, he indicated that is a reasonable speed at which an adult male or an individual, for that matter, could throw a drinking glass at the taillight.
Had anybody up to that point, told you any specific, let me see if I can rephrase that. Had anybody indicated that there was any evidence whatsoever that John O'Keefe had thrown a drinking glass at the taillight?
No.
Was this?
Okay, this made me laugh. They're testing. Listen, you have to remember something. The DOJ and the FBI hired these experts, given limited information to them, and to do some testing. Okay. Because this is what our tax-paying dollars go to. I see you. So here's the thing. If they're throwing a glass out of an air cannon that they developed, which is really cool, and there's no evidence to suggest that, and the Commonwealth didn't bring that little doozy up, remember, because he's holding the cocktail glass as he's being sideswiped, pirouetting into the air and falling on the ground, causing his skull fractures, right? At, mind you, 12:45 a.m., when we know Karen Reed was already home, per her voicemail. At, what was it, 12:38? 12:36 or 12:38? Don't quote me, but it's not 12:45, right? So what are they really doing? Hey, Matthew. We're talking about air cannons and potato guns. I hope you had a good birthday. Glad to see you. So we're talking about Sir Crash Daddy over here, this fine looking thing, talking about science. And so Jackson just asked, why was there any evidence to suggest that John O'Keefe at 30 to 40 miles an hour threw this cocktail glass like, this is my payback, bitch, for being so ugly to me the last 2 weeks. In the most Southern country voice. That's what John did. And he throws it, cracks her tail light. So what does Karen do? This mother. And then backs up into John, et cetera, et cetera. Make it make sense, everybody. If you just really listen and think about it in your brain, or put yourself in John's shoes, right? In thought, in theory, not in real life. Please don't do that. Don't go to cop's house and get murdered by them. That would be horrible. Allegedly. Don't take that. Don't be too desensitized. Actually put yourself in the position in your mind and go, does this even make sense at all? If I were sitting here like this, it just doesn't. But the FBI and the DOJ was like, see what you could do. Let me know what you think. They were actually throwing out theories that the evidence or the Commonwealth wasn't even presenting. Yeah, think about that.
This is another example of you and Dr. Richler and your team just exploring sort of every possibility and working a little bit in the blind.
Objection.
Sustained.
What was the reason that you decided, or you?
And there you go, working in the blind. Tater guns. Mm-hmm. You know, do you know anything about that up in Wisconsin? About them tater guns? I'm sure.
When your team decided that you wanted to approximate how a grown man could throw a glass at a taillight?
Well, I think we wanted to have an understanding is when a projectile such as a drinking glass interacted with the taillight, would we get damage on the test taillight that was consistent with that of the subject taillight?
Understood. So based on your theory, were you able to approximate the damage on the taillight?
Yes.
Describe that for us.
So as I mentioned, we ran two tests. The target speeds were at 30 and 40 miles per hour. And there was a little bit of variability in terms of what our target was and what we actually achieved. So the achieved speeds were at 31 miles per hour and 37 miles per hour. So there's just depending on how the glass leaves the barrel and some of the rotation can affect some of the speed, or ultimately the end result speed to that. So what I will say, though, is that with the 37 mile per hour projectile into the taillight, we noted and observed that there was damage that was consistent with that of the subject tail lamp, and that the test tail lamp had the majority of the outer lens fractured and missing, broken into pieces, as well as some underlying damage to some of the internal components as well.
Are you saying, well, let me ask a different question. You were able to replicate the damage to the taillight using a pneumatic cannon firing a glass at 37 miles an hour directly at the taillight, correct?
Correct.
All right. And that would also shatter the glass too, correct?
Correct.
I'm sorry, but the look on his face. Yeah. It's almost so ridiculous that they had to do this theory. And I don't look. Listen, Linda, I think that this was not because they wanted to see if Karen was guilty of a crime backing into John O'Keefe. They were trying to figure out who or how the taillight was broken in that Sally port with the 40 minutes missing. John O'Keefe was drunk, per the toxicology results. What was it? 1.8, 2 over the legal limit? 0.20, I mean? 0.18? Think about that. You think somebody with a 0.18 blood alcohol level is going to throw 30 to 40 mile an hour a cocktail glass? Now, look, some people out there be tripping and get superhuman when they're drunk because their blood sugar goes low and somehow they become Hulk smash. Very rare, very, very rare. These are like big teddy bear, bulky guys. Not that I have experience with that. I'm just saying, I don't see John O'Keefe, if he had that much alcohol in his system, throwing a glass, hitting that tail light with accuracy, right? No, that's just me. Was it 2.8? 0.28? Excuse me. No way. So I was right. It was 0.21 and above. Okay. Damn. That's drunk. Isn't that over twice the legal limit? Yeah. Way over. How does that even work? I don't know. He should be like, oh, well, you know what, Sleuthy? Now that I think about it, he was recovering from the previous night drinking, I believe, because he said he just got sober via text between Karen and him, right? Remember the texts? And I can pull that up in a minute. It might take me a second to pull it up, but if you trust me, that's what John said to Karen. I just got up I'm barely just getting sober or something like that. So he had already been drinking, which seems to be the common theme and problem. And I've always said this, right? He's already pretty much weakened from that. Then he's fighting with Karen all day and he's all stressed out. Then he goes to drink and he gets blitzed, apparently, if it's 0.21 to 0.28. His blood alcohol level. So I don't see him throwing the glass and hitting with accuracy at 30 to 40 miles an hour her taillight. So I think the FBI and the DOJ, in my opinion only, wanted to see who in the Sallyport could or would. How did they break that glass? What are the different ways that they could have broken the glass? I personally believe it was one of those glass breakers, you know, the ones that save you whenever you go into you drive into a lake and your doors won't open, so you crack the window breakers. I think that's what somebody used, or like a baton or something. That's just me. I have heard a lot of theories, but I don't know. Am I reading your mind? Okay. Because not Lally. Alan Jackson drops hints like you wouldn't believe in this trial, and I want to compile those. One of them being him giving a theory as to what the FBI, the DOJ may be thinking what happened to John with those two trials that Andrew Rentschler testified to, where he worked for the prosecution. Anyway, I'll make a video on that because I really feel like that was kind of a tell. Like, this is probably what happened. He fell down the stairs and hit his back of his head on something hard because he got punched in the eye twice. One on the left, one on the right. That's just me.
Did you do any testing about whether or not that damage to the taillight could be produced by a person simply holding a glass and being hit by the car driving in reverse?
We didn't do any testing of that, and primarily because, again, if we're looking at the arm and its total length, right, we only have a narrow damage pattern, which on the taillight, if you think about where
that you would expect to see at 15 miles per hour or above on the taillight, if in fact that vehicle were moving in reverse and were to strike something on a human body, for instance, an elbow or an arm.
Objection.
I'll allow that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Probably not.
Sorry.
I'm trying. Physics, that's why. From your testing, what would you expect to see in terms of the damage to the right rear taillight if, in fact, that taillight were to make contact with a part of a human body, for instance, an elbow or an arm, at 15 miles an hour or above? What would the level of damage be as compared to the damage that you actually saw?
Well, if we compare it to, again, looking at the drop test that we did with the hybrid head, which weighs about 10 pounds. So again, if we're talking about now a human arm that's comparable in that same weight, we certainly would expect to see a comparable level of force and damage. So as I mentioned, if the arm is outstretched across the right tail lamp and into the liftgate section, I would certainly expect to see deformation to that body paneling, even potentially the tail light on the liftgate itself and that chrome piece as well.
Based on the entirety of your investigation, your entire team's investigation, all the testing that you did, all the biomechanical testing and the engineering and the physics testing that you did, in your expert opinion, was that taillight damaged by striking John O'Keefe on the head?
Objection.
Sustained.
In your opinion, was the taillight damaged by either striking Mr. O'Keefe on the head or the arm?
Objection.
Sustained.
May we approach?
Yes.
You are muted. Do you really?
Taillight that you saw consistent with striking a human head?
No.
In your expert opinion, is the damage to the taillight consistent with striking a human arm?
No.
Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, jurors, we will take our morning recess.
Taillight that you saw consistent with striking a human head?
No.
In your expert opinion, is the damage to the taillight consistent with striking a human arm?
No.
Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, jurors, we will.
Since Lally and Bev didn't want to give him what I thought was a stupid objection, it wasn't leading, it's an expert. Or putting words in his mouth. He said, nope, not consistent, which is all the jury needs to hear, honestly. So none of Plevin's theories, basically, which I know he's just probably trying to please the McAlberts because he's a shell of a man, but a shell. And his closing argument is worth less than nothing, purely on Crash Daddy. So let's go to Cash Daddy. Cash Daddy Andrew Rentschler, who I think, honest to God, I'm not trying to name drop, but I think I saw him at a Dallas Stars game when Boston was there. I'm almost positive he was in the next box over. And it would make sense because I do believe he brought up hockey. Something about, helping reinvent the wheel, basically, of the glass that surrounds the rink because it was hurting players. Anyway, I'm almost positive he was next door.
Yeah. I'll do it back there.
That's what everybody's.
And that we have to the Lexus, primarily the right rear tail light cover, as well as we perform testing to evaluate the strength of that.
To the arm, I know I'm going back and forth. And more damage to the taillight at a higher speed.
Forearm now are hitting the head. At that speed, you're going to produce
circumstances. What exactly did you review in coming to your opinions and conclusions and performing the tests that you performed?
Well, we looked at, there was police reports with respect to the incident, medical records for Mr. O'Keefe, as well as the autopsy report, photographs of the evidence in this case involving the Lexus, the tail light, the incident scene where the evidence was found, as well as some other documentation.
And you also worked with Dr. Wolf, who just left the courtroom, correct?
I did, yes.
Did you two have sort of a distinct role in, although working as a team, a distinct role in making determinations and conclusions about the incident?
That we did. There was a distinction. Certainly some of our work overlapped, but there was a distinction with what each of us actually did and performed with respect to this case.
Following your review and your investigation and analysis, did you make any determination as to whether any of the injuries suffered by Mr. O'Keefe in this case were consistent with producing the damage that was seen on the SUV?
I did, yes, sir.
And what did you base your opinion on?
My opinion was based on certainly the medical records, the description of what the injuries were, the damage that we have to the Lexus, primarily the right rear tail light cover, as well as we performed testing to evaluate the strength of that tail light cover and look at the damage associated with different types of impacts. And also to look at the overall evidence of where everything was found, where Mr. O'Keefe was found, what the injuries were, how they may or may not have occurred based on the damage we have to the vehicle.
So did you look specifically to find whether or not you could determine the forces required for Mr. O'Keefe to suffer the injuries that you saw in the records, medical records, et cetera?
I did, yes. I determined in my analysis whether there was sufficient force with that damaged taillight and interaction with that taillight to produce any of the injuries that were listed or diagnosed in the autopsy report and the medical records.
What, generally speaking, what injuries would you expect to see in a vehicle-pedestrian interaction at, say, 24 miles per hour?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Just generally, Doctor, if you would, please.
Yes, Your Honor. So 24 miles an hour, once you get up to that speed, you start to see fractures. You see significant ligament and tendon damage.
Ooh. Can anybody tell me if there was any ligament damage or any fractures below the neck? Nope. It's over. It's done. It's a wrap. It's finito. It's over. This is the final chapter. I do not see in anyone's mind a conviction of Karen Reed in this case. I mean, that's very damning evidence. 24 miles an hour, that's the Commonwealth's theory. You have to look at the opening argument and their closing argument, connect the dots with everything that's in between in the trial with the expert and witness testimony. It just does not, it's reasonable doubt, period, the end. So I don't see a jury convicting Karen Reed at all. I'm just going to throw that out there. I think it's never going to happen. Now, has a jury switched it up on people in history? Yeah, of course. But I just don't see it. I don't. That is a lot of damning evidence right there. He has none of the typical things that you would see in any of the Commonwealth's theory. And it's really sad because it kind of proves that the Commonwealth or third-party culprits in tandem with the Commonwealth thought they could just pull it off out of their ass. They thought that they were going to get away with it because they are them. I really do believe that. We had proof that Lally, or they proved it, the defense proved that Lally was in on that mirrored video. Come on. He knew about it. He didn't say shit. It's very obvious that he knew exactly what was going on. Lally knows. Snake in the grass, if you ask me.
I mean, usually about 15 mile an hour impact is where you start to see damage to, for instance, the leg and the knee. At that speed, you're going to produce, if you impact the vehicle, you're going to produce upwards of 1,000 pounds of force on the body, depending on what part of your body impacts the vehicle. So certainly at 25 miles an hour, you start to see significant injuries occur.
Is that true for any part of the body that is struck, whether it's center mass or an extremity? 1,000 pounds of force because of the speed of the vehicle?
Well, force is equal, Newton's second law, force is equal to mass times acceleration. So the acceleration is going to be the same. It depends on the mass of whatever body part's being hit. So from the testing that we did at 15 miles an hour, we used a head form which weighs about 11 pounds. And that produced almost 1,000 pounds of force, a little under that for the head. So anything that weighs 11 pounds is going to produce almost 1,000 pounds of force. The heavier the object, if you get hit center mass, that's going to be even greater force because that's more mass than just 11 pounds. So the acceleration is the same for each body part. It just depends on the weight of the body part and how heavy it is to determine.
Well, even if it hit the arm or sideswiped the arm was obviously right above center mass. It's not going to be that much different. You're going to go backwards through your arm, but your arm should break. Your arm should have bruising, you know what I mean? It's just not, the Commonwealth theory is doo-doo. All of it. Reasonable doubt everywhere, in my opinion. So let me get to Lally's and then that's it. that's a wrap for tonight.
Similarly, there's going to be very little.
Depending on what Mr. Eve has going on tomorrow, I'm hoping that we could stream everything tomorrow and the next day if necessary. So I'll have to, I don't know, do something nice. See if I can do that. I would really like that because it's been a long year, y'all. Really has.
Then it would extend out likely to the edges of where it would contact the rest of the taillight.
From a biomechanics and or a physics standpoint, or an engineering standpoint, is it reasonable if someone is standing with their arm extended to be hit by a moving vehicle at say 25 miles an hour and the body, the center mass of the body to be projected?
Objection.
Ask it differently.
Is it consistent in your view with engineering principles and physics principles that you know if an arm is hit, extended, not the body, just the arm is struck, for the body then to be projected?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
It's not, no. So if we have contact, your arm's down, we have contact to the arm. I mean, first of all, it's a ball and socket joint, so the arm can move independently of the rest of the body. So with enough force, even if you're contracting your arm and trying to hold it out as tight as possible, it's going to overcome that muscular contraction and basically just move the arm. But secondly, it all depends on your center of mass. The center of mass is kind of the equilibrium point of your body of where your weight's distributed. And for most normal people, the center of mass occurs at your umbilicus or your belly button. So wherever your belly button goes, that's where your body's going to move. They teach this to football players, right? If you're a defensive back and a running back comes around the corner and it's you against him, they tell them or they teach them to watch the waist and watch the belly button. It doesn't matter what your
Removal report, is that right?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Some videos.
Okay, so basically he reiterates what Alan Jackson got him to testify to. So, Lally, and then we're done. Red-eared Lally. Really needs to get that blood pressure checked. I'm telling you, something's wrong there.
You talk about the lens cap to the taillight assembly, the taillight assembly photographs of that nature, and then there's mention of a black straw that was found on scene, correct?
Yes, sir.
There's no mention in the report of either Mr. O'Keefe's shoe or his hat, correct?
Objection. May we approach?
Yes.
You are muted.
Welcome in, Leonard. Amber. Glad to see you here. Love your tweets. Been pretty much stalking everybody that either follows or interacts with Sleuthy. So glad to see you here. Very, very happy. So Lally is lollygagging as usual. Let's just go forward and show how much of an ass he made of himself. All right.
You weren't provided with any sort of forensic reports, DNA or anything like that, is that correct?
I don't believe so, no, sir.
You never actually looked at the physical car, is that correct?
I did not, that's correct.
And you're aware that the physical car,
I love this
defendant's
part.
car is still in law enforcement custody and available for inspection if you had wanted to. Are you aware of that?
Are you aware that you could have, although you didn't, you could have inspected the vehicle, sir? And he's like,
I think I'm aware of that, yes, sir.
But you never made that request, is that correct?
That was not necessary in this case to inspect it.
Let me replay.
That you may see with reference to injuries that are left by that blunt object. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Now, as far as in general terms, from what you reviewed, at any point in time did you look at a state police reconstruction report?
I don't believe that I did, no, sir.
You weren't provided with that, is that correct?
That's correct, I don't believe so.
You weren't provided with any sort of forensic reports, DNA or anything like that, is that correct?
I don't believe so, no, sir.
It was at that moment that the Commonwealth went, oh. They weren't looking into what we thought they were. Oh, shit. Right? They learned their fate is about to go down in flames.
And you never actually looked at the physical car, is that correct?
I did not. That's correct.
Where the physical car, being the defendant's car, is still in law enforcement custody and available for inspection if you had wanted to. Are you aware of that?
I think I'm aware of that, yes, sir.
You never made that request, is that correct?
That was not necessary in this case to inspect the vehicle.
Whether it's necessary or not, you didn't make that request, correct?
Yeah, I don't remember if we made that request or not. We obviously didn't look at the vehicle, but it wasn't necessary in this case.
You could tell he's hiding something when he's shrugging and he's like, oh, we didn't need to because it was worth shit. Sorry, dude. Your evidence is shit. Your evidence is worth nothing.
You ever look at the actual taillight pieces or the taillight housing, is that correct?
Not the actual. We looked at photographs of the evidence, yes.
Now, the injuries that you observed or reviewed in materials in regard to Mr. O'Keefe were primarily on the right side of his body, is that correct?
Well, sir, on the right arm and the posterior aspect of the right arm, yes. And then the skull fracture was a little bit to the right, the occipital fracture.
Also bruising on his right hand, is that correct?
There was bruising on the back of his right hand, yes.
On the dorsal aspect?
Yes, correct.
And there was also bruising on sort of the posterior of his right knee, is that correct?
There was a small bruise, I believe, yes, sir.
Now,
yeah, you're so protective, Jima.
With respect to within your report, you talk about the numerous linear abrasions on the posterior of Mr. O'Keefe's right arm and forearm, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in relation to those injuries, there is a sentence in which you or whoever authored this part of the report, I'm assuming it's you, indicate that furthermore, any such injuries would be highly improbable if Mr. O'Keefe was wearing a jacket, correct?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that Mr. O'Keefe was not wearing a jacket other than a long sleeve footed shirt?
I believe that came to light afterwards. Again, it doesn't affect my actual opinions in this case, but it was a sentence added in there, yes, sir.
And so also within your report, same paragraph, you indicate blood and DNA transfer would also be highly probable under such circumstances, none of which were reportedly found on the tail lamp assembly or any of the fractured pieces, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware that DNA consistent with that of Mr. O'Keefe was actually found on the tail light housing from the defendant's vehicle?
I'm aware after we wrote or issued the report that it became known to us that I believe DNA was tested and some DNA was found, I believe a small amount. I don't believe any blood evidence was located or found on any pieces. But there.
Yeah, a small amount of DNA or something, but I don't believe there was any blood or anything. So, not that it's relevant, because your evidence is garbage.
There was indication of DNA on the taillight housing.
There was also DNA matching Mr. O'Keefe that was found on the exterior of a piece of drinking glass that was found right near his body.
I believe so, yes, sir.
And there was also pieces approximately 1/16 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch of clear and red plastic that was subsequently found to be consistent with the defendant's taillight that was found embedded within Mr. O'Keefe's shirt.
Within the shirt, I believe, yes, sir. No.
He is not phased, sir. Lally, you're lollygagging too much. He's not phased with your sprinkle taillight dust that Proctor Trooper planted, all right, with whatever he was using to bust the taillight with, which is what I think the DOJ and the FBI wanted to find out. How did you break, or whomever, what if sort of any one that was in there, Salaport, on the video, broke that taillight and then planted it? That's what they're trying to figure out.
Not his actual body.
And so this is all things that you found out after you issued your report in February of 2024, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Wait, what date was that? Let's go back. What date?
Report that it became known to us that I believe DNA was tested. You'd have to look at the free.
And so this is all things that you found out after you issued your report in February of 2024, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
That was only a few months ago, wasn't it? And are we talking about the DOJ and FBI report? Because they didn't write a report, did they? They didn't write a report for this, for the courts, right? So, are they closing in a little faster than people think? I don't know what to make of that.
Now, when you were talking about the injuries to the back of the head of Mr. O'Keefe, consistent with coming in contact with a hard surface, correct?
Yes, sir.
Would that hard surface include if the ground was frozen?
Well, you'd have to perform an analysis actually, because you'd have to determine how hard that ground was. You'd have to look at the freeze and thaw cycle, probably leading up to weeks of that. You can't just look at ground and say, well, it's below freezing, so that ground must be frozen. I mean, is it a possibility? It may be, but you have to go through an actual analysis and procedure to determine how hard that ground is and whether it could have produced those injuries.
So it is something that's capable of being done by you, is that correct?
Performing that type of an analysis?
Yes.
You could go through and do it, sure, yeah.
And you didn't do it, correct?
No, I did not do it, no. Because, yeah, there's no need in this case. We don't know what happened in this case. There's no indication of, certainly.
There it is, y'all. There's no indication of what really happened, or that it really probably 99.5% chance that it never happened. We're not trying to figure that out, sir.
It's not consistent with getting hit by the car and ending up where he did, even if the ground is somehow hard enough to cause that type of an injury. Again, there's no movement and no force to get his body over there, and then the damage with the car is inconsistent with him being struck by it. So whether the ground could cause it or not, the roadway could cause it, the curb could cause it, a back could cause it. There's numerous different possibilities, and we don't really have enough evidence in this case to determine what one specific event actually caused that injury.
I would like to ask Sicilian Queen Kissy emoji why the DOJ and the FBI would ask for this information from a third party expert. Let me know. But Sleuthy is right. They're not going to stop a trial. They can't stop a trial. They're under the investigation. The investigation of of John O'Keefe's investigation, and the prosecution of Karen Reed is under investigation. I don't know if you saw that. I could definitely go to my Twitter just for you and pull that up real fast, because that's a fact check. Go to my medias and show you. Right there. December 5th, 2023, when Ted Daniels comes out swinging with the investigation information, right? A few months later, rather, from the initial. Excuse me. Morrissey's letter provides the first official confirmation that the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Mass is looking into the arrest and prosecution of Reed. They're looking into that. See that word? But they have no jurisdiction, like Soothie said. But they watching. Don't mind me just watching.
You didn't have enough evidence based on what you were provided. Isn't that fair to say?
I didn't have enough evidence based on what I was provided, and even looking at the additional evidence that I became aware of after the fact, there's still no evidence. I mean, you can't deny the science and the physics as to what would have happened if he was struck by the vehicle. So anything past that, you have to somehow overcome that hurdle, which is very difficult to do.
When was it that you looked at this additional material, and who provided it to you?
We were informed after a report was issued that DNA was found. And that was really the primary issue. I believe that some DNA was found on the housing, which, again, there's numerous explanations or ways that DNA can get on a light housing.
Well, let me ask you this, sir. With regard to the materials that you were provided with, was there anything in there that stated that Mr. O'Keefe's skull fracture on the back of his head was caused by contact with the tail light?
No, I don't believe there was anything in those materials that stated that.
Is there anything in those materials?
So there was no materials suggesting anything related to your dumbass opinion on what happened in this case, or what your alleged evidence is based on corrupt police. So, I mean, it's really that simple. To answer Sicilian Queen Kissy Face, bias investigation is why. That's not a good question. Bias investigation is why. You're going to have to expand on that. You're not too good at this. Objection. I disagree. That's a fact, Jack. Hey, that's my line. The investigation is over, or the trial would have been held off. As we said, the jurisdiction thing. But here is what I honestly think of your opinion. That's what I think. And I have a soundboard and I can do those things. Glad we got that squared away.
Materials that indicated or that anyone stated at any point in time that Mr. O'Keefe's arm was outstretched at the time that he was struck by the vehicle?
No, sir, there wasn't.
Was there anything in there indicating that his arm was tucked in at the time that he was struck by the vehicle?
You know, there's no indication in any of that evidence of what he may or may not have been doing, how he may or may not have been positioned. I mean, that's the whole issue. There's no evidence to indicate what may have allegedly occurred in this case.
Did you hear that? Ooh. Ouch. Let's just rewind that just a second. Because Lally tried to be smart.
That his arm was tucked in at the time that he was struck by the vehicle?
You know, there's no indication in any of that evidence of what he may or may not have been doing, how he may or may not have been positioned. I mean, that's the whole issue. There's no evidence to indicate what may have allegedly occurred in this case.
So the experts are telling you your evidence isn't going to matter. Like I've been saying on repeat. I'm sorry, guys. It's just that Lally just pisses me off. Really does.
Now, typical pedestrian.
The profile of that vehicle and the speed of the vehicle. Yes, sir. There's many different factors involved in it.
And so in a typical pedestrian collision, when a pedestrian is struck by the front of the vehicle, that involves more of an assumption of the velocity of the striking motor vehicle by the pedestrian than you would expect to see in a sideswipe collision, correct?
Well, I mean, yes, generally speaking, a sideswipe means that the person or the pedestrian, the vehicle,
right?
don't
Exactly.
obtain a similar or common velocity. So if you're standing in front of a car and it hits you, it's going to speed you up to that same speed and then disengage. The sideswipe means that there's not this mass-to-mass impact. By its very nature, sideswipe has minimal forces. We see it even between vehicles that just
Agreed.
rub against each other. So if there's a sideswipe impact with a pedestrian in a vehicle, there's going to be very little damage to the pedestrian. And similarly, there's going to be very little movement. There's really no force at all acting. You know, for instance, if a car came and swiped by your arm, but didn't have enough force or enough contact to cause any damage, well, it wouldn't actually cause any movement of the person either. So a sideswipe by its very nature involves minimal impact, minimal forces, minimal velocities.
Right. Thank you. You're not going to do this little number from a sideswipe. Nope, not gonna happen. That's not how it works. You don't do a pirouette. Why do I want to say pivot like from Friends, but pirouette? I don't think it would work. But I think you get what I'm saying. So this trial has made me feel like this, even though that is the anti-Karen readers. They need a break. Maybe this is a good place to do that. The cell block. But the gist of the matter is that it's not what people think. This evidence, the evidence presented is so subliminal. And I'm not talking about the evidence that the Commonwealth is trying to portray as evidence. I'm talking about what the defense is presenting as evidence subliminally through questioning and the responses from troopers, perhaps, and Brian Higgins and Chris Albert and all these things. This is for a bigger picture. And we all know that, or most of us know that that evidence is basically coming from trial into the hands of bigger, better authorities. Allegedly. And it's really going to blow my mind, and a lot of people's minds, once we may get a little hint of what that all entails with this corruption. We'll see. I'm definitely going to be watching. I'm always watching the DOJ. I got a subscription, which is free, but I'm just saying I signed up for the emails for the DOJ. That's how nerdy I am. I got emails on blast. I'm ready to see some action. And it might take a few years. It usually does, right? In these cases. Going to trial, if they find anything worth prosecuting over, takes years. So worth the wait, though. This is why I need a verdict tomorrow, or hubby has to do laundry Wednesday alone. Sir Hubby, you are on your own, right? I have spent over 2 months watching this with my peeps. I'm not missing the verdict. I'm not either. I hope Mr. Eve understands that too. Like, I need to know. I can't miss it. She connected to OJO's Wi-Fi at 12:31. Trial over. I thought it was 12:36. 12:31. Either way, it's before 12:45, which is the Commonwealth's theory that that's when John O'Keefe was hit. The time don't fit, you must acquit. Right. If the time don't fit, you must acquit. Karen Reed is innocent, in my opinion.
Different scenarios that could result
in. So I love this picture of Karen Reed, by the way. It's one of my favorite ones. These are all my favorite pictures. It's really hard to find a picture of Miss Little looking at the camera and smiling at the same time, unless you're holding them hostage like maybe microdots out there. But no. I love this picture. Worked really hard on it. So anyway, tomorrow, verdict, closing arguments. If you're watching the replay, put what you feel her verdict will be. Put your guess down there. And I will see you guys on the next live. Thank you so much for everybody who stopped in and said hello, all the new faces, Sleuthy, and people who Sleuthy brought over. Gma, my OG mod. Thank you so much for being here. Susan Skinner. Taryn. Thank you guys for being here. J-Lo. All right, guys. Hit that like button on your way out. Have a good one. Free Karen Reed, justice for John O'Keefe. Bye now.